Single dad takes his triplets to a 2 diner. What a billionaire heiress did next shocked everyone. The neon sign flickered like it was about to give up, just like him. At exactly 2:03 a.m., a tired single father stood outside a quiet roadside diner, holding the hands of 3 half-asleep toddlers who didn't understand why their world had fallen apart so quickly. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow, and his heart barely holding on. The cold night air wrapped around them, but he didn't move. He just stood there, as if walking inside meant admitting that this was really his life now. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen when we least expect them, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel, because stories like this remind us that hope can appear even in the darkest hours. He finally pushed the door open. The bell above the diner rang softly, echoing through the nearly empty space. A tired waitress glanced up from the counter, surprised to see a man walk in at that hour with not 1, but 3 children clinging to him. The kids, 2 boys and a girl, all barely 3 years old, had tear-streaked cheeks and sleepy eyes. They looked like they had cried themselves into silence. His name was Daniel, and just 3 months ago, his life had been something completely different. He had a wife, a modest home, and a rhythm that, while not perfect, felt safe. But life didn't shatter slowly for him, it collapsed all at once. His wife had walked out without warning, leaving behind only a note and 3 children who didn't understand why their mother never came back. Bills piled up, shifts doubled, sleep disappeared, and slowly Daniel lost everything except his kids. Tonight had been worse than usual. The electricity had been cut off. The fridge was empty. And after hours of trying to calm 3 hungry, crying toddlers in a dark apartment, he had finally reached his breaking point. With nothing else left, he bundled them into his old car and drove aimlessly until he saw the glowing diner sign in the distance. Now, sitting in a cracked leather booth, Daniel tried to hold himself together. He ordered the cheapest things on the menu, just enough to quiet their hunger. The kids sat close, leaning into him, their small bodies seeking warmth and safety. He kept smiling at them, even though his hands trembled and his mind raced with fear he couldn't afford to show. What he didn't notice was the woman sitting alone at the far end of the diner. She had arrived quietly, dressed in simple but elegant clothes that didn't quite belong in a place like this. Her posture was composed, but her eyes told a different story, one of exhaustion, loneliness, and something deeper, something unresolved. Her name was Elena, though no one in that diner knew it. And if they did, they might have recognized her as one of the youngest billionaire heiresses in the country. But tonight, she didn't look like wealth. She looked like someone running from something. At first, she only glanced at Daniel and his children out of curiosity, but then she kept watching. Something about the way he gently wiped his daughter's tears with his sleeve, or how he quietly broke his own piece of bread into 3 equal parts without taking any for himself. It pulled her attention in ways she couldn't ignore. She had seen money, power, luxury, but she had never seen this kind of love, and it unsettled her. Daniel tried to laugh softly when one of his sons dropped a spoon, but his voice cracked. Waitress, noticing his struggle, hesitated for a moment before bringing extra napkins without being asked. Still, it wasn't enough. Hunger wasn't the only thing sitting at that table. Elena slowly stood up. Something inside her had shifted, something she couldn't explain or control. She walked across the diner, each step quiet but intentional, until she reached their table. Daniel looked up, confused, slightly guarded, unsure why a stranger would approach them at this hour. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she did something no one expected. She gently pulled out a chair and sat down beside them, not across, not at a distance, but close enough to feel like she wasn't just observing, she was stepping into their world. Daniel tensed, instinctively protective, but he didn't push her away. Maybe because he was too tired. Maybe because something in her eyes didn't feel threatening. She looked at the children first, offering a soft, reassuring smile. Then she turned her attention to Daniel, not with pity, but with quiet understanding. And in that moment, something changed. The waitress returned with more food than Daniel had ordered. Plates filled the table, warm, fresh, far beyond what he could afford. Daniel looked confused, ready to protest, but the waitress simply nodded toward Elena and walked away. He froze. The children didn't hesitate. They started eating, their small hands grabbing food with relief that broke something inside him. Tears filled Daniel's eyes, but he turned his face away, ashamed of being seen like this. Elena didn't speak much. She didn't ask questions or offer empty words. She just stayed there present, as if she understood that sometimes people don't need explanations. They just need someone to sit beside them in silence. Minutes turned into an hour. For the first time in weeks, Daniel wasn't rushing, wasn't panicking, wasn't calculating how to survive tomorrow. For just a moment, he breathed. But life doesn't change that easily. When the bill came, Daniel reached into his pocket, already knowing he didn't have enough. His heart started racing again, the brief sense of relief slipping away. But before he could say anything, the waitress quietly placed a receipt on the table, stamped with a single word, paid. Stared at it, confused, overwhelmed. He looked at Alina, but she had already stood up. She paused for a second, looking back at him, not with pride, not with expectation, but with something softer, something human. Then she walked out, no explanation, no name, just gone. Daniel sat there in silence, trying to process what had just happened. The children were full, calm, even smiling slightly. For the first time in a long time, they didn't look scared, and somehow that mattered more than anything else. But the story didn't end there. Because what Daniel didn't know was that Alina hadn't helped him out of charity. She had done it because she saw herself in him. Years ago, before the wealth, before the headlines, before the expectations, she had been the child sitting in a broken home, watching a parent struggle silently. She knew what it felt like to be powerless, to be afraid, to wish for just one moment of kindness. And tonight, she couldn't walk away from that memory. The next morning, Daniel woke up expecting the same harsh reality, but something was different. There was a knock on his door. At first, he hesitated, then he opened it. Outside stood a man in a formal suit, holding a small envelope. Inside it was a card with only a few words written neatly. Everyone deserves a second chance. Below it was an address, and that address would change everything. What followed wasn't instant success or unrealistic miracles. It was something more real, more powerful: opportunity, a job offer, a safe place for his children, stability that he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't handed to him without effort. He still had to work, still